A boot cracked through the silence of falling snow, not into a door, not into a trash can, but into the ribs of a German shepherd standing guard in front of his owner. Dr. Grace Hayes froze, breath blooming in the cold, fingers whitening around the leash. The rich man's son laughed like this town already belonged to his family, like her little veterinary clinic was just one more obstacle on a glossy development map. He thought Grace would fold. He thought the dog would learn fear. But from a pickup parked half a block away, someone had watched it all. Ryan Mercer, a retired Navy SEAL, trying to survive one quiet winter without the war following him home. He didn't step in like a loud hero. He stepped in like the cold itself, controlled, certain, and final. One low sentence.
There are some
one
lines
look
that can't
made
be
the kid
bought,
understand for the first time in his life that some lines can't be bought. If you've ever seen good people cornered by power, if you've ever believed a loyal dog should never become a message, this Snowtown story will stay with you. Because in a moment, you'll see how that single kick lit a fuse that reaches from the clinic doorstep to the mayor's office to the sheriff's badge. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from today. Your state, your town, even your living room. We read every comment. The sound wasn't loud. That was the worst part. A boot hit a German shepherd's ribs with a dull thud, swallowed by falling snow and a street that had learned not to interfere. Rex yelped, stumbled, then forced himself upright, body angled between his owner and the man who'd hurt him. Dr. Grace Hayes dropped to one knee, hands already checking his side with a veterinarian's precision. Across from her, Logan Whitmore stood in a designer coat like winter couldn't touch him. Behind him, a black SUV idled at the curb, windows tinted dark. "Control your dog," Logan said, "or I'll have Sheriff Hargrove handle it." Grace kept her palm on Rex's shoulder. "He's under control," she said. "He just doesn't tolerate bullies." Logan's smile tightened. He stepped closer, daring her to flinch. A man watching from a pickup across the street finally moved. Ryan Mercer crossed the road without hurry, without drama, just a straight line through the snow. Mid-40s, plain jacket, eyes that missed nothing. He stopped beside Logan, close enough to be heard. "Walk away," Ryan said. Logan turned, ready to fire back, then stalled when he met Ryan's gaze. It wasn't rage, it was certainty. "Who are you?" Logan snapped. "You don't get to—" Ryan lifted a hand, not to grab, not to strike, only to indicate Rex and Grace. "You kicked her dog." "So?" Logan said, louder now. "It growled at me." "It stood between you and her," Ryan replied. "That's what a good dog does." Grace felt relief, and the fear that came with it. In Pine Haven, help always had a cost. Logan leaned forward, hungry for the usual leverage. "Do you know who my father is?" Ryan didn't blink. "No?" "Alistair Whitmore," Logan said. "Summit Terra Development. This block is being redeveloped. Your clinic is in the way." Grace rose slowly. Rex braced against her leg, shaking but upright. The faded sign above the door, Pine Haven Veterinary Clinic, looked smaller under Logan's confidence. "This clinic was my father's," Grace said. "It's my home. It's not for sale." Logan laughed. "Everything's for sale. You're just sentimental." Ryan shifted half a step. Not aggressive, but Logan's posture tightened anyway. "Here's how this ends," Ryan said. "You get in your SUV, you leave, and you never put boots on her dog again." Logan's cheeks flushed. He searched the street for backup. Curtains stayed closed. "This isn't over," Logan said. "My father will hear about this." Ryan's tone didn't change. "Let him." Logan spit into the snow and stalked to his SUV. The door slammed. The vehicle rolled away like it owned the road. When the engine noise faded, the silence felt heavier. Grace knelt beside Rex again. "Easy, boy," she murmured, checking for swelling. Rex tried to lick her glove. "He needs an exam," Grace said. "Ribs, leg." "I'll carry him," Ryan said. Grace blinked. Rex was big. Ryan slid his arms under the dog and lifted in one smooth motion, careful and controlled. Rex rested his head briefly against Ryan's shoulder, tense but trusting. Inside the clinic, warmth and antiseptic surrounded them. The bell above the door chimed. Grace guided Ryan to the exam table and worked fast. Ribs, gait, range of motion. "No breaks," she said at last, exhaling. "Deep bruising, pain, but he'll recover." Good, Ryan replied, yet his eyes kept tracking the front windows like a habit he couldn't turn off. You didn't have to step in, Grace said. People like him count on everyone looking away, Ryan replied. She hesitated, then pointed toward the tiny break room. Coffee? The room was cramped and warm, the refrigerator covered with photos, Grace, her late father, and Rex as a pup. Grace wrapped both hands around her mug. It's been getting worse, she admitted. Inspections, anonymous complaints. My supplier canceled my account. Someone's trying to choke me out. And the sheriff? Ryan asked. Grace's laugh was thin. Sheriff Dale Hargrove shrugs and files a report. Mayor Curtis Bain tells me, smiling, to take Summit Terra's offer before it gets inconvenient. Ryan's jaw tightened. Coordinated pressure. It's my father's legacy, Grace said quietly. If I sell, it's like admitting money can erase him. From the front room, Rex gave a low rumble, watchful, controlled. Grace's stomach clenched. Ryan's gaze went distant for a heartbeat. You came here for quiet, Grace said. I did, Ryan replied. But quiet doesn't mean safe. The bell above the front door chimed again. A woman stepped inside, shaking snow from a too expensive coat. Her smile looked rehearsed. Dr. Hayes, she said, I was told you could help. I'm new in town. Grace straightened, professionalism taking over. Ryan didn't move, but something in his posture locked. That night, long after Grace turned off the lights, shadows slipped behind the clinic, boots crunched softly. A pause, then a sharp crack, glass giving way. Rex barked once, deep and furious. By dawn, Grace stood in her doorway staring at ruin. Cabinets overturned, equipment smashed, files scattered. On the exam room wall, dripping red paint delivered the message in block letters, sell or lose everything. Snow kept Pine Haven quiet, not clean. Sheriff Dale Hargrove arrived at the clinic almost an hour after Grace's call. He walked through the broken back window as if it were weather damage, not a warning. His eyes paused on the red message in the exam room, sell or lose everything, then slid away. Vandalism, he said, already writing. Any suspects? Grace's hands tightened around a trash bag of ruined supplies. Logan Whitmore was here yesterday. He kicked Rex. Then this happened. Hargrove's pen stopped for a beat. That's a serious claim, Doc. You got video? Ryan Mercer stood near the doorway, calm as stone. I saw it. The sheriff finally looked at him. And you are? Ryan Mercer, Ryan said, passing through. Hargrove gave a small nod that meant nothing. Well, I'll file a report, but with Summit Terra in town, emotions run hot. Try not to escalate. Grace stared. Escalate? Someone broke into my clinic. Hargrove's expression cooled. Also heard concerns about your dog. People don't like feeling threatened. Rex sat at Grace's heel, ears forward, silent. He wasn't threatening. He was watching. After the sheriff left, the clinic felt smaller. Grace cleaned and rebuilt because stopping would mean thinking. Ryan stayed to help, quiet hands doing practical work, sweeping glass, boarding the window, resetting locks. You don't have to, Grace said. People like that count on you being alone, Ryan replied. At midday, Mayor Curtis Bain arrived with a smile built for cameras and snowstorms. He shook Grace's hand like they were old friends. Dr. Hayes, I'm sorry this happened, he said, gaze flicking over the clinic as if estimating it. Pine Haven doesn't stand for threats. Then stop them, Grace said. Bain's smile softened into something paternal. Summit Terra is bringing jobs. The county needs it. Alistair Whitmore is willing to make a generous offer and move forward quietly. No more drama. Grace heard the subtext. Sell, or the pressure becomes worse. I'm not selling, she said. Bain exhaled like she was being unreasonable. Change is coming either way. Don't be the last person standing in front of it. Ryan spoke, low and even. Funny time to talk about change when someone just trashed her clinic. The mayor turned toward Ryan, surprised. His smile adjusted, still polite, now sharper. And you are? Someone who doesn't like bullies, Ryan said. Bain nodded once and left with his aides, boots crunching like punctuation. That evening, a woman walked into the clinic carrying a notepad and the kind of steady eye contact that didn't ask permission. Maya Cortez, she said. County paper. Sometimes national outlets when a story turns ugly. She gestured at the boarded window. This already looks ugly. Grace hesitated. People don't talk here. They do, Maya said, just not where the sheriff can hear. Her gaze moved to Rex. And they said someone kicked your dog. Ryan stayed behind the counter, quiet. Maya's eyes lingered on him, half a second longer than polite. You military? She asked. Ryan answered with a question. You here to help or to watch? Both, Maya said, because this pattern is predictable. First they pressure, then they create a public safety reason, or a professional scandal. They don't just buy property, they buy the story. Grace felt cold gather under her ribs. So, what do I do? Document everything, Maya said, and don't give them a clean moment. They didn't wait. 2 days later, Grace walked Rex down Main Street under a pale winter sun. Ryan followed at a distance, hands in his pockets, watching reflections in windows and parked cars the way operators watched corners. Logan Whitmore stepped out near the coffee shop, smiling too bright, flanked by 2 men holding phones like they'd been waiting for the scene. Well, look who's brave, Logan called, the vet and her dangerous animal. Leave us alone, Grace said, tightening the leash. Logan closed the space on purpose. Rex shifted forward, no bark, no snap. Just a solid body placed between Grace and threat. Logan threw his arms up and stumbled theatrically. See? He tried to attack me! A patrol car rolled up as if summoned by script. Sheriff Hargrove got out, face already set for the crowd. Ma'am, he said loudly, I witnessed that dog lunge at Mr. Whitmore. That's not what happened, Grace said. He provoked us. Ryan stepped in. He staged it. Hargrove barely glanced at Ryan. Sir, step back. Logan clutched his chest like an actor. I'm terrified. That dog shouldn't be in public. Hargrove pulled papers from his coat. Dr. Hayes, you've been served. Temporary injunction, muzzle in public, confined at all other times, hearing to declare the dog dangerous. Grace took the documents with shaking hands. Rex sat, looking up at her, as if he understood the leash had become a weapon. Back at the clinic, Grace tried to breathe through the panic. Then she saw the certified envelope on her desk, state letterhead, official stamps. Ryan watched him. He's focused on the collar. Grace took it down. The nameplate read Rex with the clinic number beneath. She ran her thumb across the edge and felt a snag. One tiny screw sat higher than the other, like it had been loosened and tightened again. That wasn't like that, Grace said. Maya leaned in. You sure? Grace turned the plate toward the light. The leather was worn in familiar places, but the plate looked handled, recent. Her skin went cold. Someone touched this. 3 hard knocks hit the front door. Authority, not politeness. Ryan moved to the window without stepping into it. Sheriff's cruiser, he said. An animal control. Grace's heart dropped. The hearing isn't until next week. Maya's voice was flat. They don't need hearings to scare you. Ryan opened the door calmly, hands visible. Sheriff Dale Hargrove stood on the threshold with a deputy and a county animal control officer holding paperwork. The sheriff's tone was friendly, which made it worse. Evening, Doc. We're here to verify compliance with the injunction. Grace stepped forward with Rex at her side. Rex sat, steady, eyes alert. He's inside, Grace said. He's calm. The animal control officer's gaze flicked to Rex's collar. We need to confirm restraints. This is my clinic, Grace said. Hargrove smiled. Reception is public-facing. We've had complaints. Ryan asked quietly, from who? Hargrove ignored him and extended his hand. Show us the collar, quick and clean. Grace hesitated, then unclipped Rex's collar, keeping her touch gentle so Rex stayed gentle. The deputy stepped forward too fast and took the collar from her hands. Documenting, he said. Photos. He turned his body slightly, blocking Grace's view. His thumb pressed against the raised screw, testing it. Ryan's voice dropped a degree. Give it back! The deputy handed the collar over with a tight smile. Grace clipped it onto Rex again, anger and fear mixing in her throat. The animal control officer checked boxes. Hargrove tipped his hat. Follow the order, he said. No incidents, no problems. At the door he added, almost casually, Board investigator arrives tomorrow morning. Don't leave town. Then they were gone, cruiser lights fading into snow. Silence returned. Grace's hands went straight to Rex's collar. Under the warm clinic light, the raised screw was unmistakable. The plate had been handled, tested. Maya's voice tightened. They touched it because they wanted you off balance. Ryan set a small multi-tool on the counter, slow and deliberate. Or, he said, they touched it because something is behind that plate. Grace swallowed. Like what? Ryan looked at Rex. The dog stood perfectly still, ears forward, as if he'd been waiting. Ryan picked up the tool. Tonight, he said, we find out what your dog has been trying to tell you. Across the street, a dark vehicle sat with its lights off. In the snowfall, a cigarette ember flared once, then disappeared, like a signal. Ryan didn't rush the moment. He waited until Grace locked the front door, pulled the blinds, and turned off the clinic sign so the windows wouldn't glow like a target. Snow tapped softly against the glass. Rex stood between them, ears forward, watching the hallway that led to the exam rooms, as if he expected footsteps to return. Grace held his collar in her hands like it was suddenly fragile. If there's nothing there, she whispered, then we're just paranoid. Ryan set the multi-tool on the counter. In my world, he said, paranoid is what keeps you alive. Maya Cortez angled her phone camera down, recording. If we find anything, she said, we document chain of custody, date, time, hands-on. Grace swallowed and nodded once. She unclipped Rex's collar and laid it flat under the bright task lamp. Up close, the raised screw looked even worse, tiny but deliberate. Ryan braced the leather with 2 fingers and turned the screw slowly. It came loose too easily. Grace exhaled sharply. That wasn't factory. The second screw followed. Ryan lifted the metal nameplate, ARIEX, clinic phone number beneath, and for a moment it looked like nothing more than a tag. Then a thin seam appeared in the leather backing. Not wear, a cut. Ryan slid the edge of the tool into the seam and gently pried. Something small and dark fell onto the counter with a soft tick, like a pebble, but heavier. A micro SD card. Grace's knees went weak. That's not mine. Maya's eyes narrowed into focus. That's not an accident. Ryan didn't touch it with bare fingers. He pulled on nitrile gloves from the clinic drawer, the way a man treated evidence and explosives the same, carefully, without assumptions. He placed the micro SD into a clean specimen bag and sealed it. Rex sat perfectly still, as if the tension that had been circling his body for days finally found a place to land. Grace covered her mouth. Someone put that on him. My dog. They used him, Maya said, voice quiet with anger. Because nobody searches the vet's shepherd. Not in a town like this. Ryan looked at Rex. Good boy, he said softly. You did your job. Grace's eyes filled, but she didn't let tears fall. What's on it? Only one way to know, Maya said. They moved into the break room, where the clinic's old laptop sat on a shelf. Outdated, slow, but clean enough for what Ryan wanted. He insisted on caution. No home Wi-Fi, no personal devices. Grace tethered a burner hotspot Maya carried for field work. Ryan made a copy first, bit for bit, before they opened anything. He spoke while he worked, not to show off, but because Grace needed something to hold on to besides fear. Rule 1, he said. You don't trust what's on the card. You trust what you can prove about it. Maya nodded. Metadata, timestamps, cross-references. Grace stared at the specimen bag like it was a live wire. How did it end up on Rex? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He had his theory, and theories could wait until facts. The first folder opened with a name that made Maya's jaw tighten. Summit. Terra. Payroll. Inside was a spreadsheet, rows of dates and numbers, coded descriptions, initials. Maya scrolled slowly. This is a ledger, she said. Not corporate payroll, payoffs. A second folder, County Wemsu zoning. Documents, emails, PDFs. A permit trail that looked normal until Maya started comparing signatures. These are approvals, she murmured, but the timestamps don't match the county's public records. Someone backdated filings. Grace's hands shook. Mayor Bain. Maya didn't even hesitate. Or someone in his office. But look, There's more. A third folder? Hargrove. Grace's throat tightened as the sheriff's name appeared in plain text. Inside were deposit slips and account screenshots, regular transfers, offshore routing numbers, a pattern that followed Summit Terra's acquisition, dates like a shadow. Ryan's voice turned colder. He's owned. Maya leaned back, breathing through her nose. This is enough to bury him, if we can authenticate it and get it in front of someone who isn't bought. Grace's hope tried to rise, fragile and sudden. So we take it to the sheriff's supervisor or the board investigator. Ryan looked at her with a gentleness that hurt. Not yet, not while they can disappear you. As if the town could hear them, Rex stood and walked to the front window. He didn't bark. He stared into the snow. Ryan followed his gaze and saw the faintest movement across the street, headlights off, a vehicle shape that didn't belong. Someone's watching, Ryan said. Maya's fingers flew again. I'm copying everything. The laptop beeped softly as files transferred into an encrypted archive. Maya labeled it with time, date, and location. Then she created a second copy, an upload package, ready to send if they lost the first. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. What if they come tonight? Ryan's answer was calm. Then we don't lose the evidence, and we don't lose Rex. A new file sat at the bottom of the directory, separated from the others like someone wanted it found last. Riverline 02418. Maya clicked. A single document opened, a shipping schedule disguised as construction materials, delivery windows, vehicle IDs, a note in a short line of text. Offload, Frozen Elk access, night. No county units, Hargrove notified. Grace stared at the screen until the words blurred. They're using the river. Ryan's focus sharpened. The military part of him stepped forward without noise. It's an infiltration route, he said, and a smuggling route if you control law enforcement. Maya took a slow breath. If this is real, it's not just a land grab, it's logistics. Grace felt sick. Her clinic wasn't just in the way of a resort. It was in the way of something criminal enough to require silence. A sudden pounding hit the front door. Not a polite knock, a demand. Rex's hackles rose. He placed his body between Grace and the door, rumbling deep. Ryan's hand lifted, 2 fingers, a silent command. Rex held, trembling with restraint. The pounding came again. A voice called through the glass, muffled by snow. Dr. Hayes, County, open up. Maya's eyes widened. Now? Grace's mind raced. The board investigator. Ryan cut her off. This isn't the board. He moved to the side window and looked without being seen. 2 silhouettes, 1 uniform, 1 not. Animal control and a deputy. The deputy held something in his hand that caught the porch light. Paperwork. Ryan's voice lowered. They want Rex, tonight. Maya snapped the laptop shut and slid the micro SD evidence bag into her coat. I have the archive, she said. If they take the dog, we still have this. Grace's voice cracked. They can't, without a hearing. Ryan stared at the door, listening. They don't need legal, they need leverage. Rex let out one sharp bark, then stopped, as if he understood that noise could become a weapon against him. Ryan grabbed Grace's coat from the hook and put it into her hands. Back door, he said. Now. Grace hesitated for one heartbeat. Her clinic, her father's legacy, the life she refused to abandon. Then the front door handle rattled hard, like someone testing how much force it would take to break in again. Grace swallowed her pride and fear together. Come on, Rex, she whispered. They moved toward the rear hallway as the pounding turned into the first crack of something heavy hitting the front door. The front door cracked before the second blow landed. Grace felt it through the tile, wood splintering, an old building refusing to surrender. Rex stiffened beside her, then went still. Ryan's raised fingers meant silence, and Rex obeyed like it was command. Back, Ryan mouthed. They moved down the rear hallway. Grace first with the leash, tight in her hands. Maya behind with the laptop hugged to her chest. Ryan last, killing lights as he went. Grace's throat closed when she passed her father's framed photo at the front desk. Leaving felt like betrayal. Ryan touched her elbow, gentle but final. You can't protect it if they trap you inside it. Another crash. County Animal Control, open up! Grace pushed into the supply room. Cold air leaked around the board Ryan had helped install. He loosened it just enough to slip them through. Snow swallowed them in the alley. Maya's breath came fast. They can't do this without a hearing. They aren't trying to be legal, Ryan said. They're trying to be fast. They cut behind closed shops and through the pines behind the library. Grace kept one hand on Rex's shoulder when she could. His bruised ribs made him move carefully, but he never stopped placing himself between her and open space. At Ridgeline Road, Ryan's pickup waited where he'd left it. He checked the wheel wells like a man who didn't trust easy nights. Get in. Grace helped Rex into the back seat. Maya slid in beside him and tucked the evidence bag deeper into her coat. Ryan drove without rushing, lights off until the last turn. Pine Haven passed in dim silhouettes. Grace's voice shook. They came for him. Ryan's jaw tightened. They came for leverage. He turned off the main road and followed a rutted track into the hills. Old coal barn appeared, leaning doors, half-collapsed roof, the kind of place people avoided. Inside, the cold smelled like rust and old hay. Ryan parked angled toward the exit, always thinking ahead. He settled Rex on a tarp and checked his breathing with a steady hand. Rex licked Grace's wrist once, as if apologizing for being hurt. Maya opened the laptop on a crate. Dead man switch, she said. If I don't check in every 4 hours, the archive uploads, state investigators, federal tip line, my editor. Ryan nodded. We don't lose the evidence. A distant engine rolled through the hills, slow, deliberate, too confident for this road. Rex stood and went to the door gap, nose working. Headlights swept across the snow outside, then cut off. Another vehicle idled farther back. Maya whispered, "They followed us." Ryan killed the laptop screen. Quiet. Footsteps crunched toward the barn. A flashlight beam stabbed through the slats. "Dr. Hayes," a smooth voice called. "Come on out." Grace's stomach dropped. "That's not county." "Summit Terra," Ryan said. "And the sheriff." The barn door groaned. A beam slid across the floor and caught Grace's boot print. The deputy entered first, then Sheriff Dale Hargrove behind him, breath white in the cold, eyes bright with ownership. "Well," Hargrove said, "this makes it easy." Grace stepped forward, shaking. "You broke into my clinic. You can't take my dog." Hargrove shrugged. "Your dog is under restriction. You fled. That tells a story." And Rex held his ground, body between Grace and the men, a low rumble building deep. The deputy lifted an animal snare pole. "Don't," Grace pleaded. Hargrove's gaze slid past her and landed on Ryan. "You." Ryan's reply was flat. "You're trespassing." Hargrove laughed once. "This is Briar County. I decide what that word means." A broad man stepped in behind the sheriff, Summit Terra jacket, hand near his waistband, private security. The deputy lunged, swinging the snare toward Rex's neck. Rex surged, one explosive move, not to attack, but to block. The loop caught his shoulder. He yelped and twisted, teeth flashing. "See?" Hargrove said. "Dangerous." Ryan moved fast, seized the deputy's wrist, shoved him back. Controlled. The security man raised a taser. Grace screamed, "No!" The crackle hit Rex. He dropped with a sound that tore the air apart. Grace fell to her knees, reaching for him, but the security man blocked her like she was nothing. Hargrove crouched, eyes on Grace. "You want him alive? Then you cooperate." The deputy tightened the snare while Rex trembled, trying to lift his head anyway. Ryan's fists clenched, then opened again. He forced his breath steady, choosing control over rage. Hargrove stood and looked at Ryan. "You show up alone, you bring me what you stole, or that dog gets euthanized at sunrise." The deputy dragged Rex toward the vehicles. Rex's eyes found Grace's, confused, hurt, still loyal. Grace sobbed his name like prayer. Engines started. Snow swallowed the taillights. Grace collapsed onto the hay, hands empty. Maya stared at the dark laptop, guilt on her face. Ryan stood in the doorway gap, watching the darkness where Rex had disappeared. "Their mistake," he said quietly, "is thinking the dog ends this fight." He turned to Maya. "How long until your dead man switch uploads?" Maya swallowed. 4 hours. Ryan nodded once. "Good. Then we have 4 hours to set the trap, because at sunrise, they plan to kill more than Rex." The barn felt colder without Rex. Grace sat on a hay bale, staring at the empty leash looped around her wrist. Every gust outside made her flinch, as if the next sound would be Rex crying again. Amaya's laptop glowed on a crate. A timer counted down to her dead man upload. 4 hours, Maya whispered. If I miss a check-in, the archive goes to my editor, state investigators, and a federal intake portal. Grace swallowed. And if you check in? Then we choose the moment, Maya said. We control the story. Ryan stood near the door gap, snow melting on his shoulders. They want panic, he said. They want me alone. They want you desperate enough to trade evidence for your dog. Grace's eyes burned. So what do we do? Ryan set the sealed specimen bag on the crate, micro SD inside. We don't trade, he said. We take Rex back. Evidence stays moving. Maya opened Riverline. Frozen Elk River access, she said. If they're running something tonight, they'll keep leverage close. Grace's chest tightened. You think Rex is near the river site? Ryan nodded. One location, one bubble, one story. Grace wiped her face. Tell me what to do. Ryan looked at Maya. Partial drop in 90 minutes, enough to make noise, not the river schedule. If we fail, full upload. Maya's jaw tightened. Understood. They moved with the clock still running. The storm thickened as Ryan drove a logging track parallel to Frozen Elk River. Snow swept sideways, erasing tire marks. Ahead, a squat warehouse glowed with floodlights, Summit Terra's riverside staging site. Fences, cameras, men moving like this wasn't construction. Ryan killed the engine a quarter-mile out. No headlights. Maya stayed with the truck, laptop under her coat. If you don't come back, you'll upload, Ryan said gently. Maya nodded, eyes wet. I will. Ryan and Grace crossed through pines and drifted snow, climbed the fence where drifts piled high, and moved along the warehouse wall to a narrow window. Grace heard a low, strained whine. Rex was inside. Steel cage, restraint looped around his neck, trembling with controlled rage. His head lifted the instant he saw Grace. One tail thump. Then, stillness. Ryan's voice was a breath. We're getting you out. A figure stepped into the dim light. Sheriff Dale Hargrove. Smug, ready. 2 Summit Terra security men with him. One with a taser, one with keys. Told you she'd come, Hargrove said. Doc, you should have taken the offer. Grace's voice cracked. You hurt him. I restrained a dangerous animal, Hargrove replied. Now, where's what you stole? Ryan stepped into the open. You're done. Hargrove smiled wider. Bring it back, and I stop this at sunrise. Ryan didn't answer. He moved, fast, clean. He trapped the taser arm and ripped it away with a wrist turn. Keys clattered. The second guard lunged and met a shoulder check into pallets. Grace ran for the cage, hands shaking, found the right key, and snapped the padlock open. Rex surged out, not to attack, straight to Grace for one trembling second. Then he pivoted, placing his body between her and Hargrove. Hargrove recovered, furious. Shoot the dog! Ryan stepped in front of Rex, eyes flat. No. The warehouse lights flickered and dropped to emergency glow. Outside, engines rolled in, boots hit snow. Too many. Maya's voice crackled in Ryan's earbud. Vehicles just came off the county road. Lights out. No sirens. A loudspeaker boomed outside. Bryer County Task Force. Everyone down. Grace's heart jumped, then sank when Ryan whispered, Fake. He scanned the window line. Wrong cadence. No identifiers. Hargrove's smile returned, colder than the storm. Cleanup crew. You won't leave. The side door slammed open. Men in black gear flooded in. Helmets, rifles, patches that looked almost right. Ryan shoved the specimen bag into Grace's hands. Get that to Maya. Now. Grace stared. I'm not leaving you. Ryan met her gaze for one hard second. You're saving Rex. You're saving the truth. Rex nudged Grace's hip, as if he understood. Grace swallowed her sob and nodded. She and Rex slipped toward the rear exit as the fake unit fanned out. Voices sharp and rehearsed, rifles sweeping through the emergency light. Behind them, Ryan stayed visible long enough to draw attention, then vanished into shadow. Outside, snow swallowed distance, and the dead man timer kept counting down. Grace ran with Rex pressed to her side, the evidence bag clutched inside her coat like a second heartbeat. Snow erased their tracks as they slipped along the warehouse's rear fence line. Behind them, shouted commands ricocheted through the storm, too loud, too aggressive, too eager to be law. Rex moved with purpose despite the tremor still in his muscles. Every few steps he looked back, ears pinned, sensing Ryan still inside. Grace's throat burned. Leaving him felt wrong, but Ryan's words cut through her panic. "You're saving Rex. You're saving the truth." She forced herself forward. Maya waited in the truck with the laptop open, the dead man timer glaring on screen. When she saw Grace and Rex emerge from the snow, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. "Where's Ryan?" she demanded. Grace's voice broke. "Inside. They brought a fake task force." Maya's eyes sharpened. "Then we don't have time." Grace shoved the specimen bag into Maya's hands. "This is everything. Hargrove, zoning, river schedule." "I know," Maya said, already typing. "Now we make it untouchable." She initiated the partial upload first, enough to light the fuse, the payoff ledger, the offshore deposits, and the falsified zoning approvals tying Summit Terra to the mayor's office. Not the river schedule yet. Maya's hands shook as she opened a second window. "Full drop is ready," she said. "I can push it any time." Grace looked toward the warehouse lights, faint through the trees. "If Ryan—" "We don't wait," Maya said, voice tight with grief and resolve. "If we wait, they erase him and rewrite the story." Rex let out a low whine, then pressed his head into Grace's thigh. The dog's loyalty felt like a vow and a weapon at once. "This is Maya Cortez," she said, as soon as the line connected. "I just sent verified financial records and zoning fraud tied to Sheriff Dale Hargrove, Mayor Curtis Bain, and Summit Terra Development. If you don't move now, someone dies tonight." A pause. Then, "Where are you?" Grace knelt, hands on Rex's cheeks, eyes burning. "Listen to me. You're not going alone, not anymore." Rex's breath fogged against her gloves. His gaze held hers, stubborn and frightened and brave. Maya's laptop chimed. New inbound email, her editor. A man stumbled out. Ryan. 2 fake task force operators followed, rifles raised. Ryan's hands were up, not in surrender, but in control, positioning, buying seconds. Grace's breath caught. Rex growled low. Ryan angled his body, stepping left, drawing them away from the side entrance, away from where Grace and Maya watched. He was still thinking like an operator, still choosing angles, still protecting civilians, even now. The fake unit leader barked, "Drop to your knees." Ryan didn't. He shifted fast, one step into the leader's space, one hand controlling the rifle barrel, the other driving into a joint point. The rifle dipped. The second operator fired, wild rounds snapping into snowbank and metal. Rex surged forward. Grace's hand shot out, but she didn't pull him back. She ran with him. Rex hit the second operator from the side, driving him into a drift. Not a kill, a takedown. Teeth bared, but controlled. Grace grabbed Rex's harness and held him steady. Ryan used the opening. He disarmed the leader and shoved him face first into the snow. Then headlights flared on the county road. Real vehicles this time, state patrol, sirens, red and blue slicing through white. The fake operators froze. Sheriff Dale Hargrove burst from the warehouse door, face twisted with rage and panic, shouting, "Stand down! This is my operation!" A state trooper stepped out, weapon leveled. "Sheriff Hargrove, step away from the building, hands where we can see them." Hargrove's eyes flicked everywhere, searching for control, for the old obedience. It wasn't there. The storm had changed sides. From behind the warehouse, another vehicle rolled in, unmarked, heavier presence. A man in a dark coat stepped out with a badge that didn't ask permission. "Federal," he said simply. Hargrove's shoulders sagged half a fraction, then tightened again. He tried for one last lie. "This is a dangerous dog seizure and a trespass situation," he said quickly. "These people—" Maya walked forward, laptop under her arm like a shield. "Here's your ledger," she said. "Here's your offshore deposits. Here's zoning fraud signed under Mayor Bain's office. And here," she lifted the evidence bag, "is the river schedule you thought would never leave this county." The federal agent's gaze flicked to the bag. "Ma'am, step back. We'll take custody." Grace watched as Maya handed it over with shaking hands. Hargrove lunged. A trooper caught him and slammed him into the snow. Cuffs clicked shut, loud as a verdict. On the far side of the scene, Summit Terra's security men tried to melt into the dark. They didn't make it. State Patrol boxed them in, radios crackled, names were called, doors opened, evidence bags appeared. In town, dawn began to lighten the sky, turning the storm-soft clouds into pale silver. Mayor Curtis Bain arrived 40 minutes later in a city SUV, breathless and furious, still trying to smile his way out of reality. The smile died when he saw the federal badge and the sealed evidence case. His hands lifted slowly, like he already knew, and when the first unmarked car pulled away with Hargrove inside, Pine Haven's long-held silence broke, not with cheers, but with something quieter, relief. 2 days later, the clinic's back window was repaired. The red paint was gone. A new notice came by email from the veterinary board. Rex lay on his bed behind the counter, finally sleeping without his ears twitching at every sound. His bruises would heal. The fear would take longer, but he was home. Ryan stood at the front door, looking out at snow that no longer felt like cover for predators. "You should go," Grace said softly, not because she wanted him to, but because she didn't know how to ask him to stay. Ryan's eyes warmed, just slightly. "I spent years walking toward fights," he said. "For the first time, I'd like to walk toward something else." Grace's throat tightened. "What?" Ryan looked at Rex, then back at her. "Belonging?" On Saturday morning, the diner down the road filled with locals again. Not loud, just present. Grace poured coffee behind the counter for the owner, while Ryan fixed a loose hinge near the door, hands steady, face calm. Rex sat between them, quiet as a promise. Outside, winter still ruled Briar County. But in Pine Haven, the storm no longer owned the town.